Hey, Carl, Jason here. Just want to say that was a great session of DCC that we had. Really enjoyed it. You're doing a great job running that game. I look forward to maybe revisiting that world down the road. But I think that this has been a really successful game, and I'm looking forward to wrapping it up. Not because I don't want to play it anymore, but because then we can say we've successfully done this little mini campaign, and come back to it or come back to something similar down the road, maybe after your Hyperborea game where we do Slavers, because I'm looking forward to that too. But lots of fun. And yeah, I just want to thank you for running that, and thank you for being out there to jam these games. I really appreciate it, man.
Carl Rodriguez is the GMologist, GM extraordinaire, the GMologist.
All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. I'm doing another episode in the series Why You Should Play. Today, I'm joined by Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast to discuss why you should play DCC. And I'm wanting to talk about this because we recently completed a story arc in our Saturday morning DCC campaign. I thought it was very fun. It really encompassed a lot of the things I like about DCC for the most part. And I wanted to bring along one of the heroes of that tale. In fact, I would say the hero by their own admission, Jason Connerly, because he played a very cool character, very, I would say, memorable character in the campaign. So, Jason, thank you for joining me.
No, thank you for having me here. My character Idris Khan would definitely agree with you that he was the hero of the tale.
Yeah, I think actually, even the dice would agree with that. That Idris was the hero of the tale, and I think some of the things that I have like several points about why you should play DCC. So I'll start out with the first one. A lot of us grew up sort of in the late 70s, early 80s, and that was our first, first at least in memory or memorable experience with D&D. And I would say that DCC, although built on the 3.5 engine, has that OSR feel, that old school feel. What do you think, Jason?
Yes and no. It's got to me the feel of the earlier products. And I know there's a later talking point you have, but it's got a feel for the earlier products, your more Gonzo stuff. It's got a feel for stuff like Tunnels and Trolls, Arduin, and things of that nature. I don't know that it replicates really the feel of BECME per se, or so definitely not some of the later stuff that's much more tries to be a lot more grounded fantasy stuff. By the time you get into the BECME stuff and time you get in Dragonlance and you get in the D&D novels and all that, I don't think that it really feels that much like that. But I don't know. I don't know. Sell me, Carl.
Right. I feel I get the OSR feel maybe because of the deadliness. It seems that like there's no holds barred. There's none of this, you're bleeding out mechanic at 0. You are dead. Although I guess there's like you turn the body over type of thing. But I just and I think it just even though they don't have a world, I would say that the adventures that Goodman puts out give that sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy feel that is very much in line with the older so Keep on the Borderlands or other, maybe a la Dread not so much, but definitely like Keep on the Borderlands is sort of you're at the edge of a frontier and there's bygone ages that you're digging up ruins for, kind of how the Greyhawk modules also started, right? That there's this almost Wild West kind of feel to your fantasy game, and that's why I feel like it has that OSR. There's no like shining heroes and armor with lots of gear sticking out. It's like, you start very humbly, and you try to work your way to become a hero, and maybe you'll have a good day and maybe you won't. I feel like it has that kind of thing. And also I would say that even the way it's set up, there is this idea about race as class, a la
Hmm.
BX Acme, that's built into the character creation of the game. So I think maybe that's what it's hearkening to. We're trying to pull those old heartstrings from BX, and especially maybe not so much AD&D, but I definitely think it has like a BXE type of vibe to it.
No, I can definitely see that. I think it definitely hits those maybe the very early '80s and back feel more than that later feel. I think if you look at Rules Cyclopedia and read through that, or read through like the later BECMI modules or later D&D modules, I don't know that it gels, but I definitely see where you're going with that. And I think that's definitely a fair statement. But I mean, that makes sense, right? Because we're talking about Dungeon Crawl Classics, and for people that aren't really familiar with it and are listening to this podcast and curious, Joseph Goodman's plan here, he went back and he read all the Appendix N literature that is
Mhm.
listed in the AD&D Dungeons First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and then he built a game around not to simulate, not to replicate any specific book in that reading list, but to give the general feeling of those books, give the vibe, right? And I think it really succeeds at doing that.
Yeah, and in fact, in the rule book, he has an Appendix N homage, inspirational reading, right? So, and he has a picture of all these books lined up, where you can see the titles. Among them, I can see like Conan and called Jack Vance's Dying Earth, right? I'm sure there's a Moorcock. There's some Lovecraft in there actually. Fritz Lieber, that I see, some Moorcock for sure, all the Eternal Champion stuff, and Elric especially. So definitely, I think that's there, and I agree. They kind of did this rule set. They wanted to go back to it, away from. I mean, I don't know necessarily. Maybe the 3.5 engine was more based on a more modern fantasy, like maybe like the Belgariad by Dave Eddings and Raymond Feist's work, etc. I guess more modern
Well, well
fantasy.
we've got.
Uh,
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you had a point. Maybe you're countering that, or you're agreeing. I don't know. Or
Well, I mean, we got statements from, I want to say it's Monty Cook. I can look it up and you can link to in the show notes. But there's a specific statement from one of the designers of 3.0 where with 3.0 forward, they decided to exit away from real world mythology and exit away from these other things and make D&D its own mythology,
mhm.
and to make it, so kind of the head eats the tail kind of thing, where D&D feeds into its own tropes and becomes its own thing. And they intentionally separated away from the other things. And that's not saying there's not inspirational reading that affects these things, like you're saying, but it definitely, by when WotC took over, they definitely wanted to cut the strings from like deities and demigods and cut the strings from these other things and make D&D its own thing. So the art doesn't inspire you off real world. The art inspires you specifically for D&D, right?
Right. I guess that
And,
explains all the what some might call fanfic. Some novels are better than others, but a lot of novels set in the D&D world, right? Forgotten Realms, etc. The whole set of Dragonlance novels, though that was earlier. That might
yeah,
still
that was
harken to
prior
an
to,
earlier,
yeah, that was
way
prior.
earlier, harken to an earlier age. But definitely like all the Forgotten Realms book, Icewind Dale trilogy, all the Salvatore stuff, um,
Mm-hmm.
for on Drist, etc. Right. So and there are a ton of other novels for a myriad of other worlds. I think they even have like magic novels, right? So
Right.
that you're right. I would tend to agree. Just thinking off the top of my head, to your point, that yes, they have made their own mythology and they've backed it up with novels and other products, right? Not just gaming products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where in earlier games you would see, like in, you know Holmes's novel, The Maze of Peril, we've got Amazons and we've got these
Mhm.
things from our world's mythology and our world's or our world's mythology and stories. Wherein of course he's Holmes wrote your first basic set, but you're later on you're not going to really hit those things. They're bringing in the D&D version of these things, right?
Yeah, I mean, this could be a total another topic, and I think we might have it for a future show in another
Mhm.
on another. But like I even seeing here the King of Elfland's daughter in that picture, but like another show on another podcast platform. But that's I think that's pretty cool just to look at that host of books that Goodman took as inspiration, for creating DCC and to try to give it that OSR feel. So, so I think maybe you're right though. It does have those sort of trappings of OSR, the racist class, the lethality, the inspiration and sort of post-apocalyptic and sword and sorcery, post-apocalyptic fantasy, I'd call it, and sword and sorcery. But right, it uses a 3.5 engine, so it gives it a more less kind of OSR feel from the rules and more from the trappings surrounding, I would say.
Which is interesting because one thing we've seen with DCC is a myriad of different products, not unlike the 3.x days where they did the D20 and you had all the third party companies making everything you can imagine for that engine. We see the same thing with DCC to some degree. We've got all kinds of offshoot games, which are
Right.
great. And the DCC has adapted itself very well to that, whether it's post apocalyptic, whether it's, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse or Langmar, whether it's 1980s ninja movies with Ninja City, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you've got, you name it. There's a Spelljammer kind of world out there. There's Wild West.
Yep.
There's, DCC has turned to be a very versatile base rule set, which makes sense. Like I say, going back to its core, that D20 core.
Right. Right, which I think is extremely helpful. And I think that also that versatility, though, I think maybe can lead to our next point. Is this sort of, in a way, the sort of gonzo feel. And I know a lot of people don't like gonzo. I don't know. Like when you think of some of the offshoots, let's say more specifically, you think of a game like Umerica, right, which is kind of road warriors, post-apocalyptic, driving around the wasteland. You have parodies of everything from heavy metal to McDonald's to all these big mega churches so it's pretty crazy, right? And I would even say that the base DCC can be that way. What do you think? I mean, I think that's an attractive thing to me. Some people can take it or leave it. I think the gonzo antics, to me, especially in how the game is played and how it is at the table or on the VTT, leads me to be wanting to come back for more and keep running it.
Well, yeah, because I think you have your mechanic support. So Gonzo, and people go back and forth on this, and a little Gonzo goes a long way, right? Because if everything's ridiculous, then it can overpower it. But a lot of the worlds and a lot of the things, because the inspiration is that direct 70s inspiration from those books and that music and all, and what we see in like the Doug Kovacs art and everything, that throwback 70s art, and we get that kind of heavy metal feeling and psychedelic feeling in some of the weird things that happen in the modules and the adventures. And then you have mechanics that are kind of swingy, and I know we're going to talk about this, but when you look at not just like the magic system, but also critical hits, critical fumbles, you've got the mechanics kind of support that, because you've got, I don't know, swingy is the right word, but the results you can definitely get that crazy result where it's a really, really good result, or something crazy bad happens to your characters in it. And you have to release yourself to that as a player, release a little bit of control to, oh, well, I don't, you have to not be too invested maybe in your character. But I think that helps helps support that feeling in those modules, because the system is also a little bit gonzo because of that swinginess and because of the kind of fun results you get. It's just like playing Rollmaster or Middle Earth role playing back in the day when you get those crazy critical hits, where the hit severs somebody's spine, or he, crushes his heart and he can't, he's paralyzed for the next 2 rounds and then he dies or whatever. And this isn't that bad, but I think the rules support the gonzo feeling in that way. And it also supports genre tropes in those things with like your halfling and things like that, and your dwarf that can smell gold and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So it's very similar, I guess, another game that has that kind of idea. And I would say these are like wow moments or laugh out loud moments during gameplay when, you roll a fumble and then you roll on the table and you trip, right? Or
Mhm.
weapon goes flying, and now the characters have to figure out a way. I need to get back my powerful weapon to finish this fight, or and that I would say that leads to players, I would say, thinking out of the box and attempting these kind of crazy things because of that. Not just the fumble and crit charts, which can lead to very hurrah and wow moments, but also I would say like the D dice, right? That the
Mhm.
right that the fighters have. I recall a fantastic moment. I don't know if you do, when in your America game where you were able to use the D dice to wonderful effect to get like a very much of a Road Warrior-esque scene during that game. I don't know if you remember it. I'll recall it for you. So one of your characters used a D dice to use a fishing pole to grab like a gunner from a opposing vehicle and pull him in front of his own vehicle because you succeeded on the deed, and then subsequently his own people ran him over, which I think
Mhm.
led to everyone rolling on the floor laughing. That's just one
Yeah,
example.
yeah. The mighty deed for the fighters is a great thing because it gives you that freedom. You're not just looking at your sheet and saying, "Well, I can do this, this, or this. I can trip him, I can disarm him, or I can attack him." Those are my only three options. With the Mighty D's, it's wide open. They give you an example, a list of examples, but the books is clear that that's just examples. That's not the extent of what they can choose, and whatever a player comes up with, that's reasonable. The GM should let them try with that mighty deed. And I think that gives you those moments where you can swing the chandelier, or you can hook somebody and pull them under there, or do whatever kind of crazy thing. And that definitely adds to the fun factor of the game, and adds to, in theory, other games give that lip service, but this actually puts it in a mechanical way in the game that doesn't limit the player, which is nice. I mean, you're limited by you have to succeed on your D die, but you're not limited as in, okay, swashbuckling means I can do these five things. No, it's kind of limited to your imagination. That
And I think that's a great point, Jason, is that the mechanics allow GM to let the players try something, right? And it's very player friendly, and maybe that's part and parcel with Gonzo, a player friendly type of system. As brutal as it can be, right? You can try anything, and I know in other games the unfortunate thing is people never try trip or disarm or whatever because then they don't get like the I would say the a numbers benefit. So with a mighty deed, you still get the bonus to hit and to damage, and you have to just hit that threshold to succeed in the deed, but you still keep sort of the numbers benefit as opposed to just picking and choosing whether you want to do something cool or just do damage. So I think the system allows for you to do both, which is kind of
Mhm.
a cool and a nice thing. So I would say, I mean, I think it's a very positive trait to DCC. And again, it's like it gives us so many memorable moments, in my opinion, from the games that we played.
No, I agree with that. I think it's a system that's definitely, you have to learn it, but and people look at the size of the rule book, but the majority of that rule book, maybe not the majority, but a huge part of that rule book are the spells, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But and each spell gets a page or two, so really, most of that rule book isn't. You don't have to read through that rule book to understand how to play the game.
Right.
The actual rules are only a few pages, really. That's
Yeah, and actually, just as an aside, something that I do like about the rule book, as daunting as it might be, and perhaps it can stop, some 9mm bullets or something, but it's actually laid out really well, and the print is big, so it's easy for us who are aging to read it. Not squint with our readers on to read the text, but it really can pop for you even from reading the text, which I think is nice of them to do that. Maybe being
and it's got a good index.
oh yeah, it does have an index that you can really follow pretty well, and I would say just as a company in general, Goodman does a lot of good things for their products to make them easy to navigate, whether it's flipping through pages or in a PDF format. So I really do like what Goodman does. So as an
And
aside.
as an aside, not to derail the podcast, but just a quick throw out. These days you have, this company did this, and this company is a bad company, and all these attacks on whatever on social media and this and that. Goodman Games, for the most part, at least what I've seen, has managed to be one of the good guys in the industry. And they have a good reputation both amongst people that write for them and work for them, and the supporting their players. If they put on a lot of tournaments, they've been putting a lot of things online, conventions. They'll send packages out to GMs if they're playing a local convention to give out goodies and things. Goodman Games has consistently been one of the good guys in the industry, I think. So if you worry about supporting a company, I think they're one of the companies you don't have to worry about supporting.
And that definitely shows by all the third party products for DCC, right? And it seems that, I don't know, I've never written or published with Goodman Games, but from what I understand and hear, they are not bears when it comes to third party products, and licensing is not a chore. It's very fair, and that's why you keep seeing all these freelancers, working for Goodman and the fantastic art and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, so well, cool. So I guess you kind of alluded to it. Part that goes with the Gonzo feel is what they've done with the Magic system. Right. So I would say perhaps I would say I'll let you talk first, since you are Idris Khan in one of your incarnations, Jason. So perhaps you can address Magic and why it's really cool to play DCC because of its Magic system.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple things here, and you've got different kinds of Magic in the game, right? You have Divine Magic and you have Arcane Magic, and I'm more familiar with the Arcane part, with your Magic user Wizard character. But I think we should mention, as far as the Cleric goes, they have separated out the healing from the spell casting. So you have a role for healing, and you have, you could fail or you could lose your ability to heal for the rest of the day or something like that. But your healing, you don't have to use spell slots to heal people. And we only have spell slots, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But just to put that out there for people worried about clerics being heal bots, that's actually not really a problem in DCC, which is nice. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but I'm mainly going to talk about wizards. But I don't know if you want to comment anything on clerics.
Yeah, I wanted to add something else about. The mechanic is very similar that Jason will talk about with regards to wizards, but with how you cast spells. But I think what's also kind of neat, what I noticed is how they kind of went back, and this goes back to the OSR feel, sort of law, neutrality, and chaos. And as a divine spellcaster, you could choose your god, and you can choose where your god falls on the new law versus chaos scale, and that allows you to not just turning is actually more versatile and in a way, and that you just don't turn undead. I know other later games, probably Pathfinder or some 3.5 third-party products or later products, added the fact that you could turn demons or extraplaners, or maybe that was even in the original, at very high levels, you could do that. But in DCC, you can turn something that is an anathema to your deity's dictate. So I think that is kind of a cool thing about the spell casting, or the divine spellcasters as well.
The other thing with the divine spellcasters I really like is, depending on that alignment, your healing is affected by that. So if you're playing a lawful cleric and one of your party members is chaotic, when you go to heal them, not only do you risk raising the ire of your god, but you're also they're not going to get as much benefit from healing as somebody that's lawful, or somebody of aligned alignment, or so that's kind of nice, that because I think if you have your god of whatever, if the lawful god probably isn't going to be as happy about healing a follower of some evil chaotic god, right? So I think that's a neat little thing.
And that's part of this sort of discussion about why you should play DCC because of its magic. I think it actually has a mechanical effect because of your alignment, not just detect spells or alignment language. There is an actual mechanical effect, for a party. If you have a lawful cleric and say a chaotic rogue or whatever, then they're not going to be healed as well, and will perhaps cause the lawful cleric to not be able to heal for a little bit because of drawing the ire of their patron, their deity, right? So alignment matters in this game, and there's mechanics behind it, which I think is kind of neat.
Right, that cleric can get disfavor from their deity, and then they'll have to do. There's a table they roll on, and they might have to do penance or whatever the effects of that are. They might have negative to further rolls, things like that, which is really nice because it reinforces that act within your alignment kind of thing.
Right. All right. So let's kind of talk about the mechanics of magic, and some people don't like this. So some people, this is a deal breaker. Right, the way that the magic works in a DCC.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Definitely. So now, so with DCC, you learn spells, and your basic spells are kind of like the ones you're familiar with at Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. But how effective the spell is depends on how well you roll, which is really nice. And now in DCC, you can also have your wizards can have patrons, whether they be demons or gods or even high level, mortal casters, whatever. But they can have patrons, and they can if you have a patron, and then you need to roll for taint, which we'll talk about here in a minute. It will vary depending on who your patron is. So your wizards can look very different just because you have 3 lawful wizards. Depending who their patron is, and just like a cleric, those 3 lawful wizards are going to look very, very different mechanically as well, which is really nice. Which brings me to another thing with the spells. Are when you get a spell in DCC, you roll to see how that spell manifests. And so my magic missile may look different than another character's magic missile depending on that roll, which is something Savage Worlds says really well is also. But I really like that. So each of your spellcasters is going to be very unique, especially as you get higher in level. They're just because of the way the rolls work and the different things work, they're going to look very different, which is nice. But you're going to roll on a table, and depending how well you roll, the higher you roll, the more effective that spell is going to cast. So you can roll everything from losing the spell. So you don't have spell slots in this game, as in you can go cast 5 spells a day. X number of spells, and that will increase as you go up in level, and as you find more spells. But if you try to cast a spell, depending how well you roll, you might lose that spell. You might fail to cast it and not lose the spell, or you might successfully cast it. And then depending how high you roll, like a magic missile, you might shoot 1 missile out that does a D4 damage, or you might send out, a dozen missiles that do 5d6 damage or something. It just depends. It's on the table. And you can get some crazy results. And what Carl was talking about at the opening of the show there, my character rolled some very high rolls a number of times in casting spells, doing things just like, just basically annihilating, trolls and hags and, these big monsters where just with one shot doing, over 100 points of damage with a single spell. And that isn't always the case, but it happens frequently enough that it's worth mentioning because it happens frequently enough to give you that fist pump moment or that big grin moment. So now, go ahead.
The counter though is that and why this is a deal breaker is that people will say, oh, but then you can fail. And then when you fail, you lose the spell and you can't cast it anymore. But I mean, I would contend, right? But you lose that spell anyway in a game that's not DCC, whether you cast it or you get interrupted or counterspelled. And in this case, if you roll well enough, well, then it's like you're double or nothing. You get to do it again. So I think that's what's kind of cool about that, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I really like the way the spell system works because it removes that part of the advancing magic of your first level character only knows 1 spell or whatever. The other thing you can do
just throwing
in here,
darts, after you cast your 1 spell, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that brings us to the other thing is wizards here are more versatile as far as the weapons they can use and whatnot. But you also in here you can do what's called spell burn. So there's 2 more points I'm going to mention here. One is going to be spell burn, where with spell burn, a wizard can actually drain some of their physical attributes. Go ahead.
I will just add in here, this is our segue into another reason why you should play DCC. I think Jason's going to talk about meta currencies, correct?
Well, yeah.
Let's talk. We're blending this together. These reasons that Jason's going to talk about, spell burn he mentioned, he probably will mention another one. is another reason you should play DCC.
Okay, so Spellburn, you can drain your physical attributes, your strength, dexterity, constitution, and add those points to your roll, so you can get a better result with the spell. Now it's going to take you, normally days to recover those points. So it's not it's definitely a very serious thing to do, but you can get some great results with it, which is nice. And it kind of hits the fiction where the spell's taking a lot out of you. It's removing your strength. It's kind of simulating that. The other cool thing, and we're not quite to the metacurrency part the car I want to talk to yet, but before we get to that, I think we need to talk about spell duels, because I think that's a great, fun thing in DCC that you don't really see in other systems.
Very with the fiction.
Oh, well, definitely. And even, when we think about spells, so you think about, and even like your movies, right? Whether it's Big Trouble in Little China, where at the end, you're having your wizard fight where it looks like a little arcade game, or go back to Conan the Destroyer, where the wizards are dueling whether to hold the door up and trying to shut the portal, right? And myriads through the fiction, tons of stories in the fiction it's there. But the spell duel is a really fun mechanism, and we've had some really fun spell duels during that campaign we just closed, didn't we, Carl?
Yeah, I think we had a number of spell duels, and I was, I guess I was very lenient on how these spell duels would work, but I think it's fine. I mean, there's really no hard fast rule, and I would think another bonus for why a DCC is a fun game is it really does allow the GM to make rulings, because not everything is codified. Right, and you make rulings sort of, they can be in favor or not of the players, but I think generally they're in favor of the fun and promoting the cool things about the system, like spell duels. So we were able to have spell duels between arcane casters and arcane and divine casters, and that really worked, such that, and the result of the spell duels were not always in exact favor on how the players planned. For example, one spell duel we had in in one of the recent adventures was that there was a sleep spell cast by one of the hags, and everyone except one of the players, the divine spellcaster, the cleric, failed their save. Everyone was asleep, and then the hag was going to double down and cast again. But this time the cleric decided to duel, and it was passed on to another character, which I thought was kind of neat. So you kind of divert the spell energy, and this really harkens to, like we said, the fiction, like I say, Myth Adventures by Robert Asprin. There's several spell duels that occur between some of the adversaries. Definitely in Jack Vance's work, there are always seemingly spell duels between the big powerful wizards in the verse. Even Ed Greenwood in when he wrote some of the early works of fiction for his famous Elminster at the Spell Fair, there's a spell duel that occurs. So it definitely is within a myriad of fictions from both the older material and newer material, and I think that's great that DCC was able to promote it. The other cool spell duel that happened in our most recent game was the characters spent metacurrency up so that they opened a rift in time-space, and while the spell was negated, there are consequences for the player and the adversary. But I think that brings us to another point about magic. Magic is more or less a embodiment of chaos in the DCC game, and that leads to their corruption, right? So there are consequences for channeling these powers. Your patron allowing you to channel these powers, and I think that totally kind of harkens back to Moorcock and the Eternal Champion of the Elric books, where magic is chaos, and you summon in a way the powers of chaos eternal, right? I think that's kind of another neat feature that feels in sync with the fiction that a lot of us who play these games like.
100%, and that chaos, and that corruption will take different forms, and depending on your patron, there's a generic thing for wizards, and then patrons have specific ones, which is another reason your higher level wizards are going to look very, very different mechanically and physically in the games, which is wonderful because it keeps you from having those cookie cutter characters in the game. Right. And with the spell duel, even though they're generally clerics get to avoid the corruption because he took part in that spell duel, the character's priest ended up with translucent skin. as a result of that spell duel, which is kind of fun. But no, I think the spell duels are a huge point in favor. They don't happen a whole lot, but when they happen, watch out, right?
Yeah, and I think
they're cool.
I'm glad that you all in the games that we played are taking advantage of those rules, right? So it's neat that you can really open and dive deep into the rule book, for where these things are in play, where it's whether it is deeds and deed dice, or the spell duel mechanic, right? So
well, we're talking about so we've talked about the mighty deeds for the fighters, and we've talked about some things with clerics, and we've talked about some things with the wizards, but the other characters like your thief and your halfling kind of fall into the metacurrency realm, which was kind of where we're headed. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about luck specifically, because I think luck's your biggest thing, your biggest metacurrency in this game.
I think that's another reason why DCC is a cool game, is the sort of luck metacurrency mechanic, and it is not so in the base DCC book, halflings and rogues kind of implement luck to do certain things, and a cool thing about halflings is they can impart luck upon other players, and they can luck again is also much like spell burn of your attributes. It takes time to get back. Right, so it's not just you can do it like every single game in an ongoing campaign, right? You have a luck stat, and that luck stat will go down for most of the players in the game as they use it to sort of add to their attacks or to their skill bonus as well. So it's diminishing, but it also can give you, and then there's also like something linked to luck that gives you like almost a talent or a feat, depending on how high your luck is as well. So I think it's a really go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah. Now like you say, all characters can use luck. The advantage of the thief and the halfling are is it regenerates naturally. Where the other characters, once they use the luck, you can get luck back. The GM can reward luck for special things and things like that. But there's no set time schedule to get luck back. So if a regular character, if a non-thief or halfling burns their luck down, they're going to be in a bad spot, because not only does that special thing you're born with, your birth augury, not only will that be a negative if you have a low luck, the game also highlights a lot of times in some scenarios, like if a trap goes off or a bad thing happens, it happens to the character with the lowest luck. So you're actually kind of setting yourself up by letting your luck burn down as well, which is kind of interesting. But like say the thief, it can build up, and then the halfling, of course, can share their luck with other people, which is interesting. Which kind of goes, I guess, the idea of fiction to some degree. But and you can use luck for if we're looking at Hobbit, I think more. I haven't read much of the D&D fiction, so I can't really comment on what the halflings are like in D&D fiction. So I don't know about that.
Yeah, so I think I guess maybe I should play demon or devil's advocate here, depending on where you fall into law or chaos. But some people will say that these metacurrencies, spell burn and luck, are abused, especially when it comes to convention games, because definitely DCC is popular in convention games. And there's no, and one shot there's no consequences. But I guess it's it's a one shot. I mean, it's the same. That's the same issue that people bring up with Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, right? So, Delta Green with willpower, right, or you're burning your bonds. Right? You're burning your bonds. Yeah. So
I don't think honestly, I mean, it's just a factor of a convention game. A one shot's people are gonna ride, because you're treating it like a stolen, you're driving those characters like a car you stole, right? Is the idea here, and it's just what it is. But in campaigns, I think people are a lot more careful, and I think that's one of the things. And this is going to be another segue, but when we look at funnels, you see that a lot. And I think it's kind of problematic with a funnel, unless you're doing a funnel, and we're going to explain what a funnel is here in a second. Unless you're doing it to start a campaign, generally people burn luck for those characters much more than they would normally, because they have nothing to lose. There's no reason not to burn that luck, because if a character's going to die anyway, you might as well burn the luck stat. But the problem is, if they survive and become a first level character, and now they have 4 luck, they're in a bad spot. It's a pretty
Right.
crappy character at that point, or at least for a while they're going to be.
Or
But
like
why don't you tell people what?
you burn or you spell burn down to 3 points. So, for a
Right, if
wizard,
you're playing
right,
a higher
same.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're playing a leveled character, definitely. But funnels, I think, are one of the more interesting things. That the thing I find interesting about funnels are they're not unique to DCC, and we see other systems doing this now as well. I think DCC very much popularized the idea of the funnel, and it's now being now you'll see OSE funnels, and you'll see funnels in other systems, But I think
5e
DCC
funnel.
really popularized it, or 5e
Yeah,
funnels, yeah.
and the funnel is effectively, right. You take a group of 4, maybe up to 6 characters. I've seen you roll randomly a 0 level human or elf or a dwarf or halfling, depending on the world and what the parameters are for the adventure. And you have anything from a pig farmer to a gong farmer, to a rat catcher, to a soldier or something like that as their, or man at arms or whatever, as their previous occupation before they went off from their little podunk village to go to the dungeon. And the idea is that as a funnel would suggest, you're going to funnel it down to one character. And you'll choose that character to then go make that character first level after the 0 level adventure, and then continue your adventuring career with that first level character. So I think it's cool. I think it might be, I would agree, overdone at conventions, but I think it's a really different and unique way to start a campaign. And I think that's the intention, so that you can start a campaign, not to have a one shot and everybody dies.
I like the idea of a funnel to start a campaign. But I definitely feel they're overdone in some ways. Now, the good thing is, especially the Goodman Games products and the third-party products, because what we've seen is a lot of the third-party products for Dungeon Crawl Classics is also very high quality and very well done. Excuse me. So a lot of the funnels are really fun adventures and really neat. But as I was talking
classics,
to somebody
right?
else,
I would say they're classics.
Mm-hmm.
Sailors on the Seas of Fate, right? Is classic.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The thing is, you could play those as first level adventures.
Yes.
So you could run, and again, we're not talking about conventions here. I'll give my ideas on convention play here in a minute. But as far as the funnels go, I think it's a great way to start a campaign off. And then even if you want to play some of those other funnels, you could play them as those follow-on adventures. Just you'd have to modify them a little bit, but you can massage 1 or 2 of them into being first level adventures for existing characters already. I don't think that would be that hard to do. But it's definitely an interesting mechanism. But I think it's played up too much, just because with a funnel, because the characters don't have classes, you're not able to experience all the cool things the classes can do, or even the magic system or any of that. So what happens if that's your introduction to DCC at a convention? You're not really being introduced to DCC. You're effectively introduced to a modified 3.0 rule set, right? It's got criticals and fumbles and all that. But I think a better introduction to the game is playing with leveled characters, so you can see how mighty deeds work and how spells work and how all that works. And the funnel's better used for either starting a campaign, or maybe you do a funnel where it's going to be a funny thing, everybody dies, because you're doing a funnel with a weird twist on it, whether it's a zombie adventure or somebody, I think it's Purple Sorcerer, might be somebody else, has a funnel where you're all halflings and they're because their food stores were taken, or it's been a few years since I read that. But yeah, there's some neat things out there. But I mean, if I want to sit down and play DCC, a funnel, unless we're starting a long campaign, a funnel is not what I want to sit down and do. And our most recent game that we finished, that campaign, we started as 5th level characters, which is pretty powerful, honestly. But I much prefer something like that, because you're starting off with the bits and bobs, and you're starting off with the cool abilities, and you're doing that. Now, we definitely could have built up to that, over time, and I would have been fine with that, because we did start we rolled up characters for a funnel, and then we just picked one and upgraded that character to 5th level. The difference in actual play is when you play a funnel. I don't know about your experience, Carl. I'm about to throw the ball back to you here, but in my experience, every time I played a funnel, is the characters I like tend to, even though you're trying to protect a character, the ones you like are always going to die. It's always going to be the character you look at with bad stats or this or that. They tend to be the ones that survive the funnel, which is, unless you're playing Andy Goodman's, because Andy Goodman, he was on of Expedition Grizzly Peaks, was on Discord the other day talking about how, oh no, you just play one character. When they die, then you pull out the next one and play it. That's how he runs a funnel. But that's not how the funnel's written. The funnel's written for you to play all 4 characters and role play all 4 characters, and all 4 are supposed to be active. And if you're doing that, the ones you fall in love with are probably going to die during the funnel.
Right.
But anyway, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you, but there's some funnels that can be kind of cool, and like, for example, that Crater Lake or the Crater Valley, a game that you ran, right?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, which is 80s horror, built around like the tropes of 80s horror movies. Yeah, I run that a couple times. I think the balance of that needs to be changed. It's a third-party product. It's not quite deadly enough, but it's it's an interesting use of the funnel. And
Right.
Yeah, things like that, definitely, like I mentioned, like a zombie scenario. So I think funnels work well for things like that, and that's fun. But if I want to play like a fantasy, I don't always want to play a funnel. I want to get to the point where I'm playing, fighters and wizards and things like.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with funnels is limited in that I've been only GM'd them, and limited to some of these classic scenarios. But I think you are right. What'll happen is that a player will look at the characters in a funnel, look at the one that has the best stats and best chance of succeeding, and play that one up, while the others are sort of sidekicks or in the periphery. But then that one tends to die because they're up in the forefront, right? And you do end up with perhaps the one that's the one who was played in the open the least, or the one that was hanging back. And that becomes your first level character potentially. Although there's some of these third-party products like Weird Frontiers that if your favorite character did die, you could come back as a particular class that's kind of undead. There's a couple of undead character classes you can play, which I think is kind of a good addition and a good way to combat that. So then someone says, "Oh man, this creature. This one had great stats, but he died." Well, then he can come back and you can continue to play him. So there's more, character choice with that regard. And I agree. I don't think it's helpful to play funnels in a convention. And I think what I'm going to try to do is maybe something a little different, because who knows how lethal a game can go because of the gonzo nature and swinginess of DCC. But I know in a game that I'm going to run in a convention, I'm going to have a first level character. So they can play with all the bobs and whistles of a first level character, especially like something like the luchador, who has like the equivalent of a D dice that can do cool maneuvers with their D dice equivalent. Why wouldn't you not? And then they'll have like a crew of zero level heroes like henchmen. So then, just in case that your prime dies, and you now play 0 levels, right? I think that can work kind of fun, and so it's kind of almost like you have a player character and then their henchmen that they got that they recruited at the local bar, which I think would be kind of neat. And I would say, so going back to what you talked about starting at 5th level, I think that it's because I kind of threw, if you recall, I threw the everything and the kitchen sink at you guys, and we wanted to test out the system, which I thought worked out really well, and we wanted to play where the player characters were competent, as competent as the players playing them, and could hold their own in tough and dire situation. But I think that also has allowed us to do, I think we've done at least one flashback, which I thought was kind of neat, where we did like a flashback with the characters and something that might have happened to them in their prior career. Because I think I started the campaign in medias res, where they're being chased by a horde of desert nomads to funnel them onto this mound, this sacred site. So
right.
Yeah, so I think it turned out pretty well, and definitely it's kind of neat to seeing the progression of that and maybe we'll get back to it. I think we will get back to it at some point, because I definitely have the sort of portal castle that you're in right now is kind of neat, So yeah,
Yeah, well,
but
it's just a matter. It's the age old too many games, not enough time thing.
yeah, too many games and
But
not enough time. But well, I don't know if you have anything else to say. I would say again, funnels are a neat and pioneering idea that Goodman Games has at least made popular, if not invented, because I'm pretty sure I am pretty sure there were 0 level things beforehand. I think even
oh yeah,
it's also
AD&D
Goodman.
has.
Yeah,
Yeah.
AD&D had 0 level stuff, right? Where you could
Hmm.
even in the Apocrypha and North Arcana, you play before you were a cavalier, you were a squire type
Right.
of thing or whatever. But at the very I'm sure in many dragon magazines, but at least they made it popular. And I would agree that to kind of close the tap on the funnel, that funnels are great to start a campaign, but they shouldn't be your only experience with DCC. And I apologize to everyone listening that if that has been your experience, try to pick up DCC again, because there's a way more to DCC than being a gong farmer and dying to the first trap in the first room.
Right, and I don't want to be too negative on funnels. I think funnels are fun and they're enjoyable, and I think everybody should play in a funnel and do that, because that experience of playing 4 characters or whatever and doing that, I think it's interesting. I think it's worthwhile. It's just not what I always. I just think DCC has so much more to offer. In addition to that, I
Mhm.
wouldn't want you to limit your experience to your exposure to DCC just to that. Definitely play that and play a game where you're playing is a leveled character, as one of the classes, so you can experience, the full game.
Right, and I think like again, to start a campaign, say for example, like in a Lankmar campaign, if you're going to play Thieves of Lankmar, then sure, to recruit you to the Thieves Guild, we're going to put a bunch of you jokers together and see who survives the gauntlet, and whoever survives is going to be given a place in the Thieves Guild, right? So you could play and I think there's a third party product where you can even play like a street urchin, where you're a 0 level character and you work your way up the ranks in, I guess, quote unquote, Fagin's realm, or yeah, or like the Gentleman Bastards books, where they start out as street
Mm-hmm.
thieves and urchins, and they work their way up to become movers and shakers. And I think that's what kind of neat about DCC. And this will probably be I'll let you get the last word in, Jason. But I think why you should play DCC, for all the reasons we've listed, and I think ultimately what that combines to give you is this feel of like being a 0, literally, if you start with a funnel, being a really powerful hero. Can you imagine what Idris Khan once was? Was he a basket weaver in the deserts of his planet? And then now he's dishing out 108-point magic missiles against Death Knights. I mean, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it definitely gives a 0 to hero arc without a doubt. It's a neat aesthetic that I know doesn't appeal to everybody, but that 70s aesthetic definitely appeals to me greatly. And I think maybe folks of our age bracket, it'll appeal, to them. And I think that's been a big success of it. But no, I really like DC. I like all of its offshoots. I really like, whether we're talking about Weird Frontiers, whether we're talking about Ninja City, whether we're talking about Umerica, whether we're talking about, is it, I forget what there's a Space Jammer one or a Spell Jammer one. I forget what it's, I
I
forget
know
what spell.
I don't know. I know there's
There,
MCC. There's Purple Planet, right?
yeah, there's so many. Yeah, MCC, which is effectively Gamma
Lankmar.
World, right?
There's the
Yeah,
Appalachia one with
Lankmar,
the chained coffin and
right? Which are adventures.
Appalachia.
There's the shoot, the other one with the off the all the books of the swords in them. The but it's earlier in that series. You've got it. The East to West,
Oh yeah, yeah. Empire of the
Eastern
East.
Empire of the
Empire of
East.
the East. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
there's soon going to
Saberhagen
be,
stuff.
the Saberhagen books, Fred Saberhagen. There's also going to be. I've got all those. I need to finish reading
Oh, the
those.
Vance.
The
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Vance coming out. We've got
The
Dying
Dying
Earth
Earth.
coming out in DCC. So there's a wide variety of other games out there based on this engine that make use of it. And some are less gonzo than others. Like, so for somebody, if Rob C. of Down the Heaps listening to this, a lot of his complaints about DCC with gonzo this or that, I think are fixed with the Lankmar book. I think Now, Lankmar is an interesting setting, and I don't want to get in too big of a rabbit hole here, and be mindful of your time. But Lankmar has been done in so many different systems,
Yeah.
right? There's D&D Lankmar. I'm pretty sure there's a Savage Worlds Lankmar. Lankmar has been in so many different games, but it's been licensed, and they've come out with official Lankmar books for so many different systems. But there are no doubt there's a GURPS Lankmar out there somewhere. But DCC, I think, really works with Lankmar, and I think the modifications in there to your characters and things make it really feel like the books. I think that's one of the better licensed properties that makes it really feel like it, and effectively uses the system to feel right. I really like DCC Lankmar. I think it's very, very well done. And if you don't like the standard Gonzo DCC thing, but you like the Lankmar books, you like Falfar and the Grey Mouser, check out the Lankmar
Yeah.
DCC, because I think it's the best version of Lankmar I've seen in a role playing game. But mind you, that's just my opinion. Obviously, other people differ, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there definitely is another plus for the game, like we talked about with Goodman, and their property, their licensing, their ability to get very good writers and artists, right, to give that the feel, that sort of DCC feel, as it were, in their, even in their licensed products, and like you said, I would say the versatility of the DCC rules engine allows for gameplay from crazy Gonzo, MCC Gamma World type stuff to a more serious game like Lankmar. So I think that's a positive for DCC and why you should be playing it. So, well, unless you have another final last word, Jason, I'd like to thank you for joining me to talk about one of the games that we really like, and I'm sure that we will get back to as the world turns.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm always happy to push a product I like, and DCC is my favorite version of Post Gygaxian D&D, without a doubt. Hey, Carl, Jason here. Thank you again for having me on to record why people should play DCC. I really enjoyed talking to you about that. One thing we forgot to mention, though, was an app for people's cell phones by Purple Sorcerer, and it's called the Crawler app. It's a wonderful app, and we used the heck out of it during our campaign. It has one there, you can pull it up. It's got all kinds of rules stuff on the app, so you don't really even need to look at the rule book. It's got rules for subdual damage, two weapon fighting, initiative, grappling, corruption. It has all the spells in there. It's got critical hit tables, fumble tables, and it has dice, so you can roll dice in the app as well. And it's free, so go check that out, folks. The Crawler app by Purple Sorcerer. Wonderful, wonderful app by a great company who also does a lot of great modules.
Hey, Jason, thank you for the call. And that reminds me something else we were remiss about mentioning. So, this fun that we had in DCC from levels 5 to 7 was completed using a product from the first Hungarian D20 society called Echoes from Fomalhaut. And I used a couple issues to string some adventures together. And these adventures are they're very good in that they give the GM a lot of fun leeway to do crazy things. It totally fits in with the DCC aesthetic. And I will put the links in the show notes to the EMDT, First Hungarian D20 Society, and y'all listeners can check out Echoes from Fomalhaut. It's been really hella cool to run some of the adventures from there. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you also, TJ Drennan, for the music. And I believe I'm going to put the cover of the DCC Dungeon Crawl Classics. The cover is done by the credits. The cover art is by Doug Kovacs, one of the main contributors to DCC. It's the traditional cover. It's from the 8th printing, but there are other fun covers. So I hope you like what you heard, and I'll put as many notes as I can remember in the show notes. TJ Drennan, take us out, man.